hosted by the International Indian Treaty Council, entitled Situation on the Line, at the Line, Impacts of the United States-Mexico Border Wall on the Tohono Rights, Culture, and Homelands. Bienvenidos a todos, mi nombre es Roberto Múcaro Borrero, soy del pueblo taíno. Voy a servir hoy como el moderador de este webinario del CITI intitulado la situación en la línea impactos del muro fronterizo entre Estados Unidos y México relativos a los derechos, cultura y las tierras natales de los Tohono O'odham. So I'm going to just give a quick, brief instructions on how to use the Zoom interpretation function. We will have interpretation simultaneous today in English and Spanish. So I'm just going to go over the instructions on how to use that interpretation function, first in English, and then I will go over it in Spanish. So please have a little patience. Para los que hablan español, voy a compartir algunas instrucciones en español, primero en inglés y después en español sobre la función de la plataforma de interpretación de la plataforma de Zoom. Voy a comenzar en inglés, después en español. Gracias por su paciencia. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, you can see up on the screen, the first thing you want to do is locate the interpretation icon. And you'll see that at the bottom right of your screen. You'll see a little globe. There's an image here of what it should look like. There's a little globe. You want to click on that globe. Then what you want to do is select English if you're speaking and want to hear English. The next thing you want to do after you click on select English is select mute original audio. So that's very important, because if you don't select mute original audio, you will hear both languages at the same time, and it'll make it hard to follow. So I'm just going to switch now into Spanish, and then I'll just continue after that in English, because we do have the interpretation. Voy a compartir las instrucciones ahora en español. Bueno, primero, localiza el icono de interpretación. Está en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla. Aquí en la pantalla puede ver una imagen a donde está un globito. Abajo del globito dice interpretación. Seleccione ese icono de interpretación. Después seleccione español. Aquí es otra imagen. Seleccione español y después seleccione Mute Original Audio, que quiere decir apaga el audio original, y esto es muy importante porque si no vas a escuchar los dos idiomas al mismo vez. Okay. Ahora voy a volver en inglés porque tenemos la interpretación. Gracias por su paciencia. All right, so I just stopped sharing my screen, and I thank you all for your patience. And I want to introduce our first speaker today, Miss Amy Juan, who is of the Tohono O'odham Hemajkam Rights Network of the Tohono O'odham Nation. She's also with our programs work here with the International Indian Treaty Council. So thank you, Amy. You have the floor.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today as we bring together community members from the Tohono O'odham and ha-jewedga and O'odham and Mexico communities. We thought that it was really important that we take the time to pass the mic on to our community members who have been dealing with O'odham border issues in one way or another. And we know that we are in the spotlight as we are looking at the oncoming border wall on both sides of us here in Arizona. There's plenty of news out there, and there's been a lot happening too as we give recognition and thanks to the protesters, the community members that have really helped bring this issue to attention to everyone, and it's been a long history, and we wanted to take the time to share that history with everyone who's tuning in today, and to help everyone understand how complex this issue is. There's many different sides. There's different ways that it affects our community, and it's important for people to understand that as we begin to strategize and formulate a vision for moving forward for our community. And so I'm really happy today for all of our speakers who are joining us today, and thank them so much for their time and being willing to come and to share with our community and the greater community, especially the international Indigenous community. I'm sure that there's a lot that we can relate to and that we can share and we can learn from each other. And so with that, I would like to read Article 36 of the Indigenous Peoples, the Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and this is in our minds as we move forward with the work and where we stand in fighting for our rights. So Article 36, 1, Indigenous people, in particular, those divided by international borders, have the right to maintain and develop contacts, relations, and cooperation, including activities for spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social purposes with their own members as well as other peoples across borders. So that we definitely have been doing that. And making sure that we take care of our ceremonies, take care of our communities, and we like to share how we've been doing that. And I'm very honored to introduce our first speaker. Her name is Eleanor Ortega, and I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Eleanor, to share with us your history, your experience, and your thoughts in protecting the ha-jewedga. So thank you. And I'll pass it over to you, Eleanor.
Eleanor, I think you have to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Did you get any? No?
Nothing at all.
Okay, we'll start again then. Skugsiarim. Did you hear that? Skugsiarim?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, pagay. Ani napchugik Eleanor Ortega. Anja apchugik Aurelia Ortega. Kanyaba apchugik Santos Ortega. Anyor apchugik Lavina Ortega. Anyavivi apchugik Francisco. Anyavivi ox apchugik Vidori. Mamhiash Ashon Am. Kanyakaya wapa. Amhiash pa Arvapa itan. Achi machut hiachut autumn. Hikidi amjut amki ami arva python. Mopchuik mochumaki dapchuchik and yaba adawanag monhaichik matamoitui amika boche. Dos chuk that the mamopi amjut him mahastub and mod umki am chumaki the monye that saponye that chamaivum that either. Mopchuik either choose haichuk chuik either stagio ea. Either sure that my haichuk ea pure the sure that the Maskuga either shoe that mam todia momko, Yawa either shoe that go the boy unboomed, Biot hujurut through the ga either shoe that my high chug ear, Bobot her earning either high chug the my oya po ear. Na pamas match mugam vapt up mom key go the shoe that could have earning a huggy, chugga my comch good mum up high chug up. Mob up what her earning either shoe that Biot huggy much archie modular through the ga either. Jumukis aponi that either pick it or shy be chuk them a puppy amjud timbo, kajikaniba. Amjudan no poto I had gone no the dog damch, but sugar that mohobi amjudush and yagi shudak no be one no key mog moya bupa crick shuda come to the hum come up him ha. Either manhokichum high chu oi the okay. When the mopino call that either cook toy the come I go him come mama chabaga either mot sonora. Och det blir sig sonora och det och det gör det achi miachi datum ida. Ganachuki Pinyaskot on Hermosillo, Kavorka, Helstar, Wus Hugget, the Jewed, Achimiachid autumn, Piot Chujik Achimata Bajuk in a boy eat a Jewed. Can see Hicks on it because I hiked Hajin Kanosh I go we, Momachabak idam Judka Majodka. Piop Masmap Juik, the Hiachet autumn of Masma much archim, what Kaidam Wum Yanyak much archim, up Masma Kuhin much archim. Piop Shai Chuik Momachabaga idam mother sonora autumn or the Piop Shai Masmap Chuik bokage. Idam was Hichet Agit Hugikari autumn Masmap Chuik Hukyu. Mat was Hicha mo Ursa Amish Mato Hicha who. Ida Masmap Nyagi the Gunyaban. Unagmon haichuk and haichus chugit mot ag idot kuran ida. Piotr shugi monash haichu if sigina bokaj. Muptuki dosha mumko. Ya jiva iya. Nova haichuk kuran mot the boy unwumptum dukchos apukat. Kaj pim tuki dosha mam do biogim iya. Wus haichu in on the haichuk mot haichu hug. What's up a boy unwumptum to stoda kad bokaj. Idot ki idam op chugam kaya wapok an hiash ganik o kij bokaj. Tuk chumukit yanyenye that ia pip tukit mop the shopi chuk to bokaj. Chumam tukit yahanyenye that ia. I wunag mata bujum mata mi humagani wunagum am chumne gishudak. But get a shwa I hutu gishudak. Kamastasho gajuit amik miachimara mamsu gamar uhig mokim chumar him uk shudak. Ada hu gishudak. Jab cuma ag masasya ka baju ka shro isi hutuk shruda ka bashkai chaga mashguk chab baju na shpilgam judgkam gana aigo at shashwa imoida cha shashwa imoy oidak. Hik diam jadab chik kagam chaniki ani patuno ga baju matat inama matat iwa gikori na pis mach mas chuik chash washwa iku huk chik shruda kagam onato kagikori. Pachu bi pachu nak shruda gamom chumar chuik arwa paitam. Hemuc mam the moshahim, kamonik, arawapai, shoy gamas ami, napi marstasho, mos ichumchu, us ikach amig shudak. I how much people say mas mapchuig am tatagel. Ugaj, much of agachi, much of the hatchet on them. A shoy patched idam eam at the chum sit kick, shoy mas manit. Mum ducky donny, the hook you mas mapchuig, a shoy gum shudak. How much of people mas mapchuig? Piap mas. Ada wanak skuga chmoyje kuik chiga hignant ko mams hig amdada ami higidant pi amjid amnit anyoki mapchi skug mas how much maptamoni pip shay masawa hukch ani got to see gukshonib da gut nan pichumnid mas hukyu mas skugaj haga mon vis ami mon hi hashpani ne bagani Sasat ka gani kaya wapo na patat magta mo shipya chukto. Ada piap shay mas mapchuik manya chumakita chukto. Pan shay sit kup ida matas chi mochu mas ju inot ku matas chi mopochi masa. Pia apo tup kasho ait torin. Wa how much matabo ay mata ay grimashan. Pia tihig das matamo iwap kmoni. Kamawa buik shurwupuk. Kamawa wap kmoni. Ya apa hagi mantag yani mobchek. Hagi matan ajo kori shay sipi after jo achim. No piachum samach moga magano ay go ki. Mabaga hamuch sonora. Piat shay sonora. Do hiachat ota majuat got ot hajin hugam. Pip chuik mota masma wahani that modash juj kam pia masma chuik. Dowa ota masma mach achim. Hugjo shay sipi nyapa. Matuma bochi ohugam sonora atam pia masma chuit a yachid atam masma much achim. Thank you.
Sopo Eleanor, thank you. For those that are listening, Eleanor Ortega, she spoke in our language in O'odham Nyalk, And I thank her for that. We always talk about how, there are certain things that we can't express in English, and most definitely for us in Autumn, it's really important to hear that passion and to hear that power that comes with our language. And so thank you, Eleanor. And I did my best to translate in the chat box. And if anyone has any questions for Eleanor later in the panel, please feel free to direct them to her. And Tapo, Eleanor.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for providing those translations in the chat and for those other explanations. Um, Very powerful to listen to the language being spoken, and I appreciate that and say hahom, in my own language. Thank you. Our next speaker is Rowena Carlisle. She's from the Tohono San Javier district. Rowena, are you there? You have the floor. Just unmute yourself. I'm not able to hear Rowena.
Yo no la
Is
escucho.
anybody else able to hear her?
Can anyone hear me?
¿Alguien me
Hi,
escucha?
Rowena. Can you go to your interpretation and go English and
Puedes ir a lo que es inglés, interpretación y luego elegir esa opción.
Yes, well, she's just setting that up.
Por favor, mientras ella lo
keep in mind,
actualiza.
everyone, that if you're going to use the interpretation feature, you need to go to the interpretation icon on the bottom right of your screen. Click on English or Spanish, depending on what language. And then you need to click mute original audio, because if you don't click mute original audio, you'll hear the translation as well as the speaker. So Rowena, I think you also shut off your camera. If you want to put that back on once you're ready to begin. So perhaps you can unmute and begin again. I'm still seeing Rowena as muted. Okay, now I don't see Rowena at all.
Rowena may be having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, it seems that we're having some technical difficulties. Again, for those who are calling in using the interpretation icon, click on the language. If you're listening and want to hear in English, click on English, then click mute. After that, you select mute original audio. Again, mute original audio. Amy, how do you want to work this now? Because I don't see.
We're also trying to get Matthias, who's calling in from Mexico. We're trying to get him situated. So David Garcia, if you don't mind, would you like to go next so we can keep moving along?
Yep, David, you just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone for tuning in, and thank the International Treaty Council for allowing us to be a part of this conversation. What I'd like to do is to begin is to read a statement, and this is a statement way back then when the former chairman Edward Manuel made the statement during the time when we were pushing for the citizenship bill by having our tribal members on both sides of the border become citizens and using our tribal ID cards. And this is the statement. Our people are no longer free to live, work, and travel. Our families are separated. We cannot visit our sacred places where our ancestors rest. We cannot freely exercise our religious rights. Under present law, some of us are subject to arrest, prosecution, and deportation because we do not have documents, and we are subject to arrest, prosecution, and incarceration for aiding, abetting, and transporting our family members. Unfortunately, that statement has come true. It has become a reality. And I say that it's because when Amy Juan read the Article 36 addressing the international borders under the United Nations, it speaks to that. But I also want to take a portion of a resolution way back then in 1995 when I sat on the Tribal Council and served 8 years. And this is a resolution that we voted on and passed addressing the traditional O'odham leaders and recognizing the 9 communities. And I just want to quote, one people through blood, language, culture, and traditions. And that's basically what this whole issue is about in terms of the international border. So I want to go back to how this began, to where we're here, to where we're at today. Now, under the Legislative Council, there are oversights that, which is the domestic affairs, the cultural preservation, the archaeological and natural resources committees who make recommendations and approve all of the items that are brought to the oversight committees. But on the issue of the international border, it was the Chukutku district that began initiating all these initiatives that what we have today. But it was also going to the communities and getting their input, and through that it was through by then when it came to the Legislative Council, all the 22 representatives that make up the Legislative Council would vote for or against any resolution, leases of land, and memorandum of understandings, and so on and so forth. So let me just touch a few of those that has been addressed, and I'm going back to 1995 because that was the beginning of the relationship between the United States Border Patrol, which is the Tucson sector. The sector covers the eastern portion of the state of Arizona to the far west, as far as Yuma, Arizona. Now, it's the Border Patrol / Tohono Police Department, and these are 2 joint facilities, one located in San Miguel, and the other one is to the west of the Chukutku district, which is the Papago Farms. These are 2 facilities that were supported by resolution, both the district council and the legislative council. And in the beginning, this is where the undocuments were brought in, processed, and ready for deportation. Men, women, and children. And then again came the vehicle barriers. And again, these were the vehicle barriers and the road projects along the international border. But before that could happen, as far as road projects, in the early 90s was when one of the liaison person from the United States Air Force, along with other departments from the federal government, were asking for support And at that time, Congress had yet appropriate the dollars to start the project on the road project from the east to the west along the international border on the district of Chukutku district. And so the district, as they do, they bring it to their communities, and then once they get the support, the district passes the resolution, and then it moves forward to the legislative council. Now then came it's no different from when the National Guard were deployed, as well as MOUs with the Border Patrol, which is the Border Anti-Narcotics Network, a ban, and then also approving checkpoints on Federal Route 15 and installation of a canopy and checkpoint stations on BIA Indian Reservation roads, which is Route 15. Again, which was the supporting again the Arizona SB 1273, which is an act making an appropriation to the Department of Emergency and Military Affairs for border radar system. And then again supporting Homeland Security, which is the Customs and Border Protection, drilling a well for water for the purpose of the two facilities. And then again, an MOU between the Customs and Border Protection and the BIA, which is the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106, regarding migration for adverse effects to cultural resources along the border on the Tohono Nation. Then came the last that I know of, that I'm aware of, because I attended the tribal council session where the United States Border Patrol Tucson sector was before the legislative council, asking for their support with the integrated fixed towers. At that time, I believe it was 17 to 18 integrated fixed towers. But on March the 22nd of 2019 was when that action came before the Legislative Council of the Tohono Nation. And the language on the resolution was consenting to grants of easement for rights of way across nations' lands for the United States Customs and Border Protection, which what was also included in that was compensation. 50% would go to the nation, 50% would be divided by both the two districts, which is Chukutku district and also Gu'oa district, because those are the two districts that fall along the international border on this along the state of Sonora, the country of Mexico. And so that was how that was a part of it, like a lot of other compensation that's made to the nation as a whole. And so when I attended that council session, I asked to be recognized and asked all the 22 council members, even though their districts had supported by resolution for those integrated fixed towers, the 10 of them, I was asking them to vote against those resolutions that they had passed. But I also was asking the former chairman, Edward Manuel, because he was before the council as well, sitting side by side with the Border Patrol Tucson sector. So I was asking the chairman of the nation that if this resolution should pass, I was asking him to veto it. And so March the 22nd, 2019, council passed that resolution supporting the integrated fixed towers. On March the 25th, the chairman of the Legislative Council, Tim Joaquin, signed that resolution, and then it moved forward to the chairman of the Tohono Nation, where he signed it on March the 25th, 2019. So what we have today is the project is a 2.5-year project once they complete it, and that would be the integrated fixed towers that will monitor both sides of the border. And so that's basically how the bureaucratic system works with all fairly recognized tribes in the country. And I can tell you in my travels is that the the tribes who are looking to the Tohono nation in terms of the southwest border, because we are the largest fairly recognized tribe along the international border. And so with that, I just want to thank all who have tuned in. And I'll just close it by saying to my O'odham friends and relatives, and also if there's other tribal leaders listening, yeah, mantashoche paka pamui mamtpuke huke sinyamichut maniktuashuke amchit masmam nuich kam kinyok mata masmam iushat ke Eleanor mo shakufa mach muich masmap tatatk mach sihas uritak tajud ka mach apchuchu uta mo manyanya piashchuchu mat pumusoi haich ach matastanyok arstkaichuk uta manya pash tuashu yuki amjut manya pchuchu mat sihas haichu matagata masmam hum amhaichu akahi ushat amauja to go tamuamak tohono tamakonar kagich mo mata mashika hasu ju amhauja am tuju machait pitwu manyanyok haich pipohoit haich piha agita kumachkam am jetek mu imuko matamawa iusha kanyok matascha mu akahi usha takahu wow sitka kagich mata masma pupu ju upaktar tu iwunukum mata paichik chuchik shan jum smachim kamasaschu aga masma makahi usha tahimak chukut kuchuk shan ka apatag masma mataya mumakik tur mata mia haitata mata maha chuk am mia chuma agmo matas muhascha nas uwa muha chukut ku jud oya hemuc mat siswin manao ku heke mata no shawa on heke waino much kohre pakita so ju heke mai potan wa muka motan muha ki tapapias masma apo ewa pe huak nikashap chapkait maktashu ke amjut maputet I chairmans how much mama ta ko the chairman net nor as a junior mapita machma masaso ju ha how much nikashap chapkait mashaitu transparency mo pia chu ya pakot itamo tamo mia touch. As I was basically saying that, you know, it's we have to be transparent. We have to tell the people. I hear tribal leaders from our nation's leaders who talk about self-determination, being sovereign and being autonomous. That's one thing. But and that's why it was important for me to read that statement, because the statement that I just read from the former chairman of the Tohono nation is where we're at today. Everything that statement says has happened. And until the leadership speaks to and holds to their sovereign right as a nation, if that's what we say we are, if we hold that we say that we're for self-determination, and if we say and tell people that we're being autonomous, because in my opinion, that's not the case. And when I hear tribal leaders taking a back seat, under the nation's constitution, you cannot deny our relatives that live on the other side of this international border. That's what the International Declaration on Indigenous People speaks to in Article 36, and the resolutions that have been passed supporting the O'odham people. So I leave you with that. The bashamasma potakta pamuy aham mumtunakos samachit jos amichut muhasmasma amkahi ushat ita apatak. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David, for everything that you shared. And I mean, I'm sure that many people who are listening have not heard much of this before, and this is why webinars like this are so important, because we will go and we will receive information that we're not getting from the mainstream education that will help us as we learn more about this issue. So now I believe that we're going to Matias Esteban. He's calling in from Sonora, Mexico. I think that's the next speaker. So Matias, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and you
Yes.
have the floor.
Skog ser min ha-jewedga hemuc ka hekum ma amateur rapit nyoit hemuc cha tata ia kaorkam moja smach aham otam moyap chuma ka kavorka ko kavorka pa ka itam juchka mate pa hem ke to po apa ka kavorka ma chuk ito otam ha-jewedga ne ani ko ta in ai ko mimerkan ha chukran in ho juchka masagi so Matias so papinya akas mas tonotin so ita man da baroche ahama moemam tapi ahpo ita man tabai hajoni ka kamach ka mamai sahpo sko ka pocho sahpo pocho ya man toma chapaha American ka chonyo ka tapi smash mo mama patmash mo American nyo ka paichi hisko ka juj ka manyo ka paichi siko mahi achim. Okay, good morning. My name is Matias. I also known as Mas Tonotim. I live in Caborca, Sonora, Mexico, and I've always lived here in Sonora, having to cross the border as a young child to go to school on the reservation, forced to learn English, and also forced to learn Spanish. So I grew up as a kid right on the border, seeing the different activities that's been going on. And it never really registered until I got a lot older, until I got the education of the white people. You know, just recently, my parents had to cross the border into cells. Comchicategoaosik is what we call it in Noatam, the original name. When they crossed, what I found kind of upsetting was that the border agent was there, red hair, white skin, and we had to wait for permission from him to go across the border. It's something that we've always have experienced ever since the early 2000s. As far as for us here in the O'odham in Sonora, we are also the same as the O'odham in Arizona in the United States. There are not very many speakers of the O'odham language, so it's very difficult for us to identify, because we have found out that the O'odham in Sonora are being utilized by different individuals as for power, gain of power or authority, and also for financial purposes. So for us here in Sonora, it's very difficult because of the line. We also get discriminated by our own O'odham. I remember as a kid, we went to Vamri. We were taken into Vamri by a person, and I guess they thought that we didn't speak O'odham. And this person had asked, "Where are you going?" to the driver, because they were driving us home. And the driver in O'odham said, "I'm taking these people back to Mexico, back across the border." And when she said that, she got upset. It was an elderly. I don't know if she's still with us today, but she said in O'odham, "Throw them on that side. They're not O'odham. They're just Mexicans. Leave them alone. Don't bring them back across." So this is the kind of mentality that even our own people have about us here in Mexico. This was never known as Mexico. This is all known as O'odham Jewed. That's how I see it. That's how the majority of my family sees it. So the border is kind of a border wall within the mentality of everybody, except very select few. Out here in, and I'm trying to keep this as condensed as I can. Out here in Mexico and Sonora, we have a lot of issues, especially with land incursions, the abuse of natural resources. Where I'm from, Huashan or El Bajío, we've had a Mexican family who's invaded the land, claiming that they have legal ownership. And you can all find this information on the Facebook page Los O'odham de Mexico Sonora. Los Otam de Sonora, Mexico. And we share a lot of information, cultural, and also stuff like what we're dealing with, the discrimination and the land incursions. Wars, as I was a kid, growing up as a kid, hearing about this land issue has always been something that, like I said, as a kid, hearing about it. Right now, they're charging rent, this Mexican rancher, the family, they're very rich people, they're in politics, as far as I understand. One of the family members is gonna be running for president for Altar, the district of Altar. Huashan, El Bajío is under the district of Altar. So, you know, that's kind of leaves us in the crosshairs here because, you know, there's a lot of corruption within the Mexican government. As far as, you know, permissions from the Mexican government, from the environmental department to the Pesquera family. As far as I know, it's falsified or they've been paid off with the corruption. Also with other problems like in Ciutaguajia, Pozo Verde, it's also been an issue being abandoned. Everybody who lived there, they all went on the other side into cells, into on the reservation. And they come down every now and then, but it's not as often. So these Mexican ranchers saw that as an advantage and went in and started owning the area. So, which is another issue that I've been working on. In Huashan, they're burning down trees. They're cutting big old trees that I remember as a kid, they were small. Now they're huge. They were, but they cut down the trees for making, to make carbon, charcoal, I think is what it's called. Also, another area that we have here in issues that we have a lot, and I know they're trying to focus on the border, but I think it has a lot to do with it because we're in Mexico. It's in Quitoac, the mines, they're taking a lot of advantage of the people there with the money that they're offering. So the Quitoac, the mines and the wall, the well, or I mean the lake is drying up as well. And the people that are there following Mexican law, we really can't do anything because it's a majority vote. So we can voice our opinions and voice and stand against it. But Mexican law prohibits us as Native Americans to exercise our rights, our indigenous rights. And same thing, like I said, with Warren, the salt pilgrimages are also under attack by the Mexican government, giving contracts to mines, a mining company to take this salt out of this area, the salt fields that we use as autumn, to utilize. The salt is something that means something to us, special, something very special. And you know, all these stuff that we have been experiencing, and all this experience that I have had growing up, I have come to the realization that a lot of the white people, the white-skinned people, who are not Native American, even if they say they may have some kind of descendancy, but if you do not live how we live, if you do not experience the discrimination that we experience, if you do not experience the genocide that we are continuing to experience today, you will never understand what we're going through. You will never understand the pain that we have, seeing the damage that's being done. My parents, my mother, 100% all of them doesn't speak English, doesn't speak Spanish. But being forced to try to speak Spanish in our own land, being forced to offer some form of identification to cross the border, is like as if I'm sitting here and I want to go to the bathroom. I have to wait for this person to say, okay, well, let me see some form of ID as if you live here. I mean, it's ridiculous. Seriously, it's ridiculous. And these autumn government aren't really doing anything. Look at what's going on with the Aruaipia. Aruaipia is ancestral land, but they can't do anything because it's off the reservation. The reservation, that's colonial term. That has nothing to do with us. That's the white people. So being reserved, you're letting the white people win. So there's a lot of issues within the autumn in Mexico. Mach pimoy chachim cheta mashke urinik chumasitanako matamoy apo chusaichu ba osich mo ay tgokokye ko mashapi apo mo prakaich David. There's a lot of opposition within the autumn, and we try to offer, as a white man say, an olive branch but it's never worked out. So I think that's what I have to say. Being a time, there's a lot to say, but there's been the time limits. So I'll leave it there. Zapo manyabuh guys, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Matias, for sharing those issues with us and for being so open. I'm wondering now if Rowena is back on the line. Will you be able to unmute yourself and also provide your presentation or share with us today? Okay, there you are. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but good to see you. Nice to see you smiling, and you have the floor.
Skuk Siarik, or Skuk Tomchus, Skuk Tash, Anya Apchigik, Rowena Carlisle, Abanja Wakchikshan, Anya Akapchigik, Franklin Carlisle, Abanja Unkakamud, Autumn, Anya Jabchigik, Clarice Carlisle, Abanja Wakchikshan. Hello, I also, I introduced myself. My name is Rowena Carlisle. I come from here, from Sanavir, which is a Spanish term traditionally known as wak. I introduced my parents. My father's from Salt River, my mother's from here as well. But also I wanted to introduce my children. I have 4 children because they're kind of who make me who I am. And so my oldest daughter is ha-jewedga, my second daughter is Kyoho, my first son is Hemajkam, and my baby son is hemuc. So they're my children, and I kind of take them wherever I go, and whatever I get into, they're right there with me. So I'm going to be speaking more on a community basis level, and hopefully, create some kind of unity with Autumn, as you've heard from this last speaker, from Matias. Thank you for that. And I can see it and I can feel it, the separations, especially with our thoughts and our voices. But I also wanted to explain that, I come from the most eastern village, or what is known as the most eastern village currently, which is Sanavir in today's times. And so we're adjacent to Tucson. We're very close to Tucson. We're just touching the boundary. Our boundaries are touching. And we have, from the border, we have about an hour-and-a-half distance driving. But we still face issues with Border Patrol in our area, patrolling our reservation. And in the past years, my nephews have come in contact, negative contact interactions with Border Patrol, where they're being aggressively questioned. And at one time, the Border Patrol was ready to draw their weapon. So my sister had to step in and make sure that there was no sudden movements, so that everyone was safe. So when it creates, when we're out in the land and we see these Border Patrol, it creates discomfort and that uneasiness and that unsafe feeling for us and for also our children, because myself and my family, we still utilize our land for different things. One of them being taka, we go out and collect our sticks, the usaka, to make an usaka. So when we're out in the land and you come across the Border Patrol, it's really feels unsafe. Sometimes when they're coming around and you see them, really watching. So we do experience those kinds of things here, and there's stories all across the land with all of them in the different districts, us being the most eastern, as I mentioned. We also have community members, elders, actually, we just talked to a couple weeks ago, that have families buried in on the other side of the border, in some of the villages, the old villages. So throughout the year, they tend to their graves and visit their family members. We actually, so we just talked to them. And it's creating these discussions and seeing what their thoughts are and their feelings about this and how it's affecting them and their family. Because we here in Sanavir are very much feeling the pressures and the as well. And the younger people, a lot with my generation and the younger people are feeling eager to do something on a community level. So I know Amy asked me to kind of touch on some of the things that we have done here to create unity within Sanavir in a community perspective. So I think and I believe that we've kind of adapted to this Western way of administering and ruling for so long because it was directed or it was forced upon us to follow this kind of system. And so that when we depend on expect to for one or two individuals to take responsibility for the whole situation, which, you know, when we, the people, still have a voice and we still have the ability to help those leaders. So, and you know, our leaders can only do so much at certain levels, but we also can do our part by helping. And one of the things that we have done is build relationships, like real strong relationships with the people. And if that is going out and speaking to the people, you know, door to door. And I know it's difficult now because of the whole pandemic, but that's what creates that unconditional support. And I have a couple examples actually. And but that's one of the things is to build those relationships with the people, the actual people. Sorry, I'm just getting my notes. So, and it just takes someone to take the lead and then the people will follow. And, you know, with that, I wanted to thank Mikey or Michael Enos is his name, and we call him Mikey, and Denise Begay, who also are from Walk here. And they're individuals who we all kind of lean on each other, and we, when something needs to happen in our community, we kind of come together and say, you know, this needs to be done, you know, how are we going to go about it? So they have been proactive and vital in making things happen for our community, whether it's hemuc, cultural events, traditional harvesting, making sure that people are taken care of. So it's creating that unity and continuing open discussions. A lot of the time we've had men's meetings, women's meetings. We have, our district has created the young men's gathering and the young women's gathering. And so all of this, it takes time. It takes time out of your own schedules and to be there and to really sit down with the people and to understand what it is that they want. And at their level, not in a formal setting. A lot of the time we use our ceremonial grounds, or we have this place called the dance hall where we have social gatherings, and we use that for a meeting, and it's outside without a time limit. So it's giving them that actual time, and you know, that's what matters. So with this whole pandemic, and this is one of the examples that we did in the beginning, we had to have a plan because we did notice that the grocery stores were being wiped out of the food. All the shelves were emptied. And so we had to really sit down and think, what are we gonna do for our community? So we came together and we talked with the women had their meeting and the men had their meeting, and it was decided that we would cook for as many weekends as it would take to help our people eat, because people cannot find food for a week's worth. And so everyone was really worried about our elders and our children. And so we had started cooking, making jumit. I think we've made over 100 dozen over in just, you know, one weekend, and distributing that out to the families because we couldn't even find a loaf of bread. And the cowboys also came together, and local cowboys donated some cows. The association donated some cows, and at one time we butchered 4 cows, and that was one of the most I guess you could call it magical moments, you know, witnessing just, it was like a ceremony, just, you know, before the sun rose, the sun was at the horizon, these men, young and old, getting ready to take care of these cattle to feed the community. And you know, sometimes when you go to these butcherings, the animals, they understand what's going to happen, and sometimes they cry out loud, and it's not a good sound to hear. But during these times of this pandemic, and the men were butchering, these cattle just laid there and they took it. So, you know, to us, they understood what they were being used for and that they were really needed. So I also want to, you know, thank my community for stepping up in that way. And that's what it takes, is to build those relationships so that like I said, there's unconditional support. I also wanted to acknowledge Phyllis Valenzuela and Janice Felix. They were supporters of us throughout the whole events that we were putting up for our community. So that's what it just takes to, you know, building those relationships and then putting the call out to the people, and they will show up, they will have support. And this is what we have done here in Sanavir. So with the land issue and the border issue, you know, we as O'odham, as Indigenous people around the world, have ties and connections to our land. We're experience on a daily basis, and utilizing and being grateful for it, and things that create the love, and that's what creates the love and the connection to our land, is really, you know, being out there and utilizing it, and knowing, having that knowledge of what you can use and what you cannot use, and what seasons you use them. So the teachings from all of these meetings that, you know, the community, these discussions, because some might just say, you know, that's just another meeting, it's just endless talking, but they're really vital in preparing you for things like this, for things that when we really need it, those kinds of teachings, that it'll come into play, such as a pandemic. So you've been to gatherings, this is what I've been preparing for. And so for when things like this happen, we can feed the people and take care of them. So understanding the meaning and the feelings of our surroundings is what is at stake, and what we'll do anything in our power to stand against. So we can ask, you know, can we live without plants? Can we live without animals? Can we live without water? And, you know, all those answers are no. We cannot live without those things. But can the plants, the animals, and the waters live without us? And yes, they can live without us. When the feelings that, you know, the heat, when you're out in the desert and you feel that heat, that's a healing in itself. And these lawmakers and politicians and administrations, they don't have that kind of connection that we do. And I don't think they can ever, like Matthias said, if they can ever, or they will never understand it, because they cannot comprehend, you know, what this land means to us if they do not utilize it, if they do not live it, they do not experience it. So they have no connection to the land. Their ancestors sailed across the seas. So if they consider anything sacred, if they consider anything spiritual, if they consider anything important, it is not here. It is across the sea where their ancestors came from. You know, our ancestors utilized this land, our trails, our walking trails, our migration trails, our water sources. Those are all, they all predate any building that has been built in what is now considered the United States, and that's including the churches. So how sometimes we try to understand, why is the government doing this to us? And it's because they don't understand, and they can never have those feelings that they have for the land that we do as O'odham, as Indigenous people. our sacred sites. So going back to, we've helped out our relatives out on the south side of the border and in Quito Paquito or Arhuaipia. And back in February, we had the ceremony to go down and meet with our relatives down there and to really try to, I guess, understand what was coming to us, because at the time there was no, the panels weren't there yet. They were all laid on the ground. And we went there and we had taken our ha'a. My mom's a really good carrier of the ha'a, and which I have a couple. And so we took 4 ha'a to collect water and from the spring. And we had all the women gathered and we walked up there to the side of the mountain and we collected the shudak. And then we walked down knowing that, our relatives on the other side of the border could not come across to the other side of the fence. So when we carried our ha'a down, there was a song that was being sung by Amy. There is just how it probably would look thousands of years ago. And so we carried this sacred shudak, as women, that's what we are to do, is carry the water. We carry children in our wombs, and it's protected by water. When we become women, we're washed off by water. And I apologize, I'm gonna get emotional. And so we carried the sacred water down and we handed it over to the fence, over to the border, the fence. And, the Ata women on that side retrieved the ha'a, and they shared it with their families. And, us on the US side, we had tears, and they talked about, that it was a relief, to finally feel seen, to finally feel a part of something, to finally feel a part of being Autumn, the ceremony. And so, they were able to nourish their families, and it's probably about what, 30 or 50 feet from the gate. And, that 30 or 50 feet, they cannot walk because they'll be prosecuted to collect this water that our ancestors have used for so long. And, we have to do those kinds of things for them to be, to feel connected back to their sacred areas, back to our sacred areas. And so, this administration, these politicians will never feel the love that we have for the land, for the water, for the plants, for the animals, and for our people. So I just, wanted to share that much, that we need to come together in unity to help our relatives and to help our land out. Our land has provided so much for us, and we can redo that now by being unified. Thank you. And I apologize for crying.
Thank you, sister. No need to apologize. Sometimes these are very powerful things we're speaking about, so it's understandable. And thank you again for everything that you shared. Our final speaker for the panel is Chairman Austin Nunez. He's also from the Hemajkam, San Javier District. Chairman, I hope you're still there. And if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. You have the floor. Following the chairman's presentation, we'll be opening up to some questions and dialogue. So if you do have questions, I know some people have posted already, you can post them in the chat and we can share them with the presenters. Thank you very much for your patience. Chairman Nunez, you have the floor.
Good day to all of you. I'm very honored to be a panelists on this webinar that International Treaty Council has put together for all of us. And I do want to thank all the panelists that spoke beforehand with all of their knowledge, wisdom, experiences. It's very heartfelt. And thank you very much, Rowena, and continue to do all that you're doing for our community, as well as along with Denise and Mikey. So my name is Austin Nunez, and my late father's name was Michael Nunez. He actually was born in Gila River. And so my grandmother's from there as well. And then my mother's from here. Her name was Sally Luis Romero Nunez. And so I myself have grown up here in Rock, Jukran, Santa Vera District, as it's known now. And, you know, you may wonder why our district, I guess, is wanting to be of help as best as we can to our relatives living in what's now known as Mexico. You know, our community here, our district, we've endured a lot of challenges as well to continue to hold on to this land that we love, that Rowena spoke about. And we continue to, we're glad that we continue to have this place to call home. And we want that to continue for those yet to come. And so being this I guess, separated by 40 miles from the main Tohono Nation reservation, and being an island out here with 72,000 acres, we are surrounded by non-O'odham, mostly on the north and the east, and then eventually, though, on the west, and it's leaked over south of us. And so there's a bedroom community, Sawarita, south of us. So being in this kind of situation, we've had to fend for ourselves to, you know, protect the land and all that's here. We've had internal land dispute that was brought on by a non-Indian developer wanting to develop 13,000 acres for 100,000 non-O'odham to live here. Fortunately, through prayer and a lot of work from people who didn't want to see our community destroyed by that, we overturned that. And then thereafter, we had a water rights challenge that we dealt with. And after 23 years, again, through prayer and a lot of work and a lot of good support from people from the outside as well, we now have rights to groundwater here, and then also imported water from Colorado River. So our fields are green again. We're able to grow our traditional crops. And then of course we have a commercial crop. So we continue to look forward to doing many wonderful things for our community here and continuing to thrive and move forward. So we understand about encroachment along the border. And of course, it is not as great, I guess, as it is along the U.S.-Mexico border. But nonetheless, you know, our elders have taught us that as O'odham people, we need to share, we need to care about each other, as well as the land, animal life, plant life. So it's that kind of thought that we have, and however we're able to assist others, then we will do so. And so my district council has seen fit to pass support resolutions for issues that emanate from the U.S.-Mexico border. Years ago, we held a international forum here to talk about those matters, and we were grateful that we could be able to host that and bring people to discuss those matters. And we today, recently, they've allowed me to participate on this project. It's called Healing the Border Project. And that group is the intention is to peacefully and prayerfully find ways to stop the construction of the U.S. Mexico border wall. And one of the ways that we did some work was to have a prayer run and prayers said at Quito Paquito Arhuapai this past September on the 27th. And this event culminated, and we realized that the social distancing needed to be had at that event. And so we just prayed that it would all come together, but the intent was to put the message forward to everyone that, you know, as was mentioned before, we want unification between us here on the US side and the Mexico side of Autumn. And we realize that even though Arhuapai is no longer on the reservation, it is still our ancestral lands. And we have an obligation to protect those sacred sites that are on our ancestral lands. And so having understood that the spring was going dry, as was mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that prayers were said so that spring would not go dry. And so there were runners from this side heading south and runners from Caborca heading north. And we met there at the border, and then water, they had a vessel of water from Caborca that they brought, and then also a staff. And so that was handed over to us. And then that water was taken to the spring to rejuvenate it. And then prior to that, we had some water from the spring and when we met the runners from Mexico, then we blessed the runners with that water as well. So there was unification at that point. And we continued with prayers at the spring, and we had representatives from Gila River, Salt River, and then also from Kumie, and then also Hopi Havasupai. So it turned out better than what we had imagined. And because of the spirits, the ancestors, our written plan, we didn't follow, but it just culminated in what was supposed to be. And so that is just one of the events that we did as the Healing the Border project. And there is another event coming up on November 12th through the 15th, and it is a prayer walk from the Gulf of California to the spring. And the intent is to bring the ocean water to help rejuvenate the spring as well. And so the walk is open, and I can probably forward some information on that hereafter for those that may want to participate. I'm told that it is a very challenging walk, and it would involve at least 2 days for sure, maybe 3 days. And the overall intent again is to bring all of them together and all people who support us. We realize that as Autumn, you know, our lives have changed. We are constantly challenged by the federal government with new regulations, the existing regulations. And I agree, we say we're sovereign, but sometimes as Tohono O'odham Nation, we don't quite act sovereign. But I do know that our current leadership has done what it can to take action to do its part to try to meet the government halfway, but at the same while continue to think about our own sovereignty, our people. And I pray that at some point that perhaps we can all get together at some point to really recognize that we are still one people, even though the borders has created that division. And I believe that we can do that at some point. That is my hope and belief that we can do that. And it's really important to continue to fight to be able to protect our land, the water, our sacred sites, the plant life, the animal life, and continue to recognize that we are all a part of it. we cannot detach ourselves from that. And that is the thinking of the non-O'odham, the dominant society. In years past, they've always wanted to dominate over everything and dominate over indigenous people. And I keep praying that that mentality will change with them and that they will recognize that we as indigenous people do have a lot to offer to be able to survive for the upcoming years and the future. And I've had the opportunity to travel globally, and I've seen other indigenous people, and there are some commonalities that we have with them, indigenous people here in the US, Turtle Island, and with the indigenous people across the ocean. And you know, it's refreshing to hear them say some of the same things that we speak about. The injustice that has been placed upon us, and the fight to continue to have a place to call home, especially ancestral lands, indigenous lands. And then I've come across people who are non-indigenous who I say have hearts like us as indigenous people. They understand, but unfortunately they're in the minority. And I'm hopeful that that percentage will rise as we move forward. And prayer is a very powerful thing. Prayer does bring us those things that we pray for. And I realize it doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen, it may take some time, but to have that hope that things will get better is what I've always felt and worked towards. So I empathize with all of our O'odham ha-jewedga that are in Mexico. And I hope that we can continue to work towards helping them. And then through that we can continue to be able to be a better Tohono O'odham nation as we move forward. And so I really appreciate being given some time to speak here, and you know, realizing that politics is here, especially in these United States. I really urge all of us to vote and make sure that we place people in there who are humanistic, people who care about human life, about plant life, animal life, everything that we have here that is naturally around us, and to be able to care about people, especially those who need it, because that is the charge of leaders. Leaders are put in positions to be able to assist their people. And in the United States, that really is not the case. So we need to make that change. And through that change of having people who have a conscience, who have a heart, and who, again, value life and the future of all of us, they need to lead us in together with all of us. And so with those words, I want to go ahead and stop here. Thank you.
Oh, Hahom, Chairman Nunez, thank you for sharing those words. We are getting close to the end of our time here for the webinar today. And with that, I want to just say it's been a real honor and pleasure to be a part of it in a small way as moderator. I'm going to turn it back over to my sister, Amy, who has some additional words. Thank you, Amy. You have the floor.
Thank you, to all of our speakers and to everyone who was able to join us today. I know it was just a small taste of, you know, all of the experience and things that each of our speakers has to share. Each of these speakers could teach a class, you know, on the different aspects and experiences that they have within our community and within the border issues of, you know, the O'odham. And I'm really glad that we also talked about, you know, some of our other communities. We're wrapping up on time, but and we're not going to be able to take any questions, but I did just want to close this out really good and just say, you know, to all of our visitors, you know, recognizing that O'odham, our ancestral land span south to Hermosillo, Mexico, north to the Scottsdale, Phoenix area in Arizona, east to the San Pedro River, east of Tucson, Arizona, and west to the Sea of Cortez. And so all of us, you know, take care of these lands, and we hold it very dear to our heart. And you heard that today, you know, even just talking about it brings up so much emotion. And it's also just really emotional, I think, for young on them is who are about my age and are in our 30s, because so much has changed in our lifetime. I think we're the last generation of O'odham to know what it was like to move freely without checkpoints and without forward operating bases and a lot of the things that we see today. And so it's really sad, you know, when we think about the future of our kids and what we want for them, and for them to have the confidence that comes with freedom and that comes from being able to move on our own lands. And so today was just a start in bringing some of these topics and these conversations to light for people to consider while we are looking towards solutions. And I do see that. I do see that we are getting there, like Rowena said, just by talking, by having a junior, by having a meeting, by hearing everybody out and hearing everybody's perspectives, that we are able to get to a place that, you know, is good for everyone. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the future, especially as we begin to go into realms that we haven't looked at before, such as the international Indigenous Peoples Human Rights arena, utilizing some of those mechanisms, and also gaining the support of other Indigenous people across the world. And then also for closer to home, you know, what do O'odham border policies look like? What does it really mean to be sovereign and to take control of this situation? And so exciting things to look forward to. And I really thank everybody for coming to meet with us today, to come together in the spirit of Iwumta, like we say in terms of coming together to work together. And again, thank you to all of our Hajj and our relatives, our speakers that took the time out to come and share. Eleanor, Rowena, Austin, David, and Matthias, thank you so much for taking the time to share. And we hope that we have more time in the future to continue these discussions. So Masapo, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope that you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.